Hello developers, testers, and everyone who likes game design.
Welcome to Studio Blues Podcast, DLC not included.
We're your hosts, Steele
And Teal.
Our podcast discusses game development and industry topics
In a relaxed conversational manner.
So we are now on our 6th episode, Teal.
Ooh, congrats on us.
And we're finally on iTunes and Spotify.
Woohoo! Celebrate!
So if you're just tuning in, here's a little bit about ourselves. I've been working with video games off and on for about 15 years. I've been a professional writer for really even longer than that. And I've been a published author since about 2012.
Yes, you have. I've been working in game design for about as long as you have. I specialize in level design, modding, and NPC and AI scripting. I also enjoy doing lighting.
Absolutely. So we have had some really great feedback on the podcast and the topics. And this next topic we feel is really important because it talks about the structure of a game and how you can enrich it. What is that topic, Teal?
Side quests, puzzles, and minigames.
So let's just jump right on into the conversation. We can see side quests, puzzles, and minigames as being both an enriching experience and a major design pitfall.
Oh, absolutely. There's so many things that you can do right, and there's so many things you can do wrong with these.
100%. I think the biggest problem that we have is when we see those side quests, puzzles, and minigames being used as padding.
Yes. If your game is not long enough, then you need to do something about your plot or your flow of your game. Please don't use side quests and minigames as a filler, as a way to make your game longer.
Absolutely. And I think that builds on to the point of avoid having nothing but fetch quests and kill quests.
There's nothing more boring than going into a town and every other NPC is telling you to go find something or go to this cave and kill something. Really? That's all there is to do there? Wow.
Yeah, and just to qualify that, when we say kill quest, we mean go kill 10 wolves. You know, something like that. We're not talking about something like go in this cave and kill this monster that's been harassing the town. That too can be overused, but that's not a kill quest.
That's not a kill quest. You gave a good example of a kill quest.
Yeah, one of our favorite games, Dragon's Dogma, unfortunately suffers from this with the adventure boards, where half the adventure boards are go find this number of items out in the wilderness, or go kill this number of monsters. And as great of a game as it was, there was a lot of padding.
Just remember, quality over quantity.
Exactly. And that leads me to my most passionate point about side quests. Side quests need to be given as much love and as much detail as the main quest.
Yes. Yes, they should. Absolutely. And every side quest should be relevant.
Exactly. You should be enriching the main quest, using the side quest to increase character growth, the character arc.
Yeah.
To touch upon lore. And not just world lore, right, Teal?
That's right. You can also have regional lore and local lore.
We recently LP'd a game that actually had local lore. And when we were LPing it, it was really cool to see that.
Yes.
Later on, we talked how rare it is that we actually see local lore in games that we critique. Most of the time, it's world lore.
So you can actually switch things up and focus on the local, focus on the micro. It doesn't always have to be macro, the world or the religion or that sort of thing.
Exactly. But even if you have a really enriching side quest that brings out character growth, that enriches your world, that enriches your main story, you can still really do it wrong, can't you, Teal?
Yes, you can, by making it missable. And what I mean by missable is it is hard to trigger.
Or even worse, if you don't trigger it at the right moment in the game,
yes.
It's gone completely.
It's gone, right.
And some of the best video games Teal and I have ever played sin this horribly. Final Fantasy X-2.
Uh-oh, that's right.
Some of those quests are completely missable, which can stop you from getting that 100%. I sense a Teal rant coming.
Ooh, don't get me started on the really bad 10-2 experience I had where I spent so many hours pursuing all the quests to get 100% completion, and because I did not see Riku fall on her ass on the mountain trail, I didn't get 100% completion. Are you kidding me? No.
It was a disaster. And the sad part is, and we'll talk about this in another podcast, the strategy guide for 10-2 actually pointed you in the direction that sabotaged you from getting 100%.
Yes, it did. And we will address that in another podcast. We're looking at you, Brady. But let me give you another example. Much earlier, Final Fantasy VII. I don't like to pick on Final Fantasy, but this is what comes to mind. Final Fantasy VII, there's a point where you go to the beach and you have to talk to Dr. Hojo. Well, when I played through 7 the first time, I didn't bother going to the beach. I had some other things I was doing. By the time I made it to the beach, Hojo was gone, and I missed that entire part of the game.
There was an entire portion of the story that just didn't come out because Teal wasn't there at the right time. Now, that may not have been a side quest per se, but you can use the exact same methodology when talking about scenes.
Sure.
Because there wasn't an organic flow to it. It wasn't like Hojo's going to be there for a short period of time. It was literally, she didn't go there when they first arrived at Costa del Sol, I think it was.
I think it was.
And you can do that with a side quest and totally screw the player out of the experience.
Yep, which makes for an unhappy player. Yes, I'm raising my hand.
And an unhappy player is a player that doesn't play a game.
Right. So that actually brings us to our next point. Use quest tracking. That can solve a lot of your problems right there with missing quests.
Exactly. Let the player know where they're at on each side quest.
Thank you.
With all the technology out for all the engines, including engines like RPG Maker, there is literally no reason never to not have a quest journal.
Sure, the quest journal you can put in, here's the quest, here's the location. This is where you find the quest. This is who you talk to get the quest started. This is what you need to do, and here's the rewards. So very concise.
Exactly. And another thing that just grinds my gears about quests is when they're time limited.
Ooh, yeah.
Now, I'm not talking about timed. There's a difference. A timed quest is you enter into this cave, you have 10 minutes to get in there, rescue the people, and get them out before the rocks fall and kill everybody. That's a timed quest. Don't overuse those, but those aren't terrible. What I'm talking about are time limited. You get a quest, and you have 3 days to complete the quest, or the quest fails. So the player literally has to stop doing whatever they were doing and pursue this side quest for fear of failure. It creates a psychological stress effect that detracts from the enjoyment of the game. And the more psychological stress effects that you hit the player with, the less they're going to want to play the game.
There are games that I'm playing recently that do this very thing, and it does kill my enjoyment of the game overall.
Which game would that be?
I can't really pronounce it well, forgive me. Atelier Sophie.
The alchemy game.
Yes, the alchemy game. You go to your quest giver, and he gives you a quest, and he says, you have 15 days to complete this quest. Actually, 15 days goes by pretty quick in that game. It really does. And when I'm busy trying to pursue main plot, or I'm trying to get enough materials to build my weapons, that 15 days can pass and then you fail the quest. At that point, there's a penalty. Not only have you failed the quest, you don't get the reward, but your reputation takes a hit.
Yeah.
So that is actually not the way to do it, guys.
No, it's not. And unfortunately, as good as the Atelier series are, as critically acclaimed it has been, most of the series is time limited.
Right.
So it narrows its audience significantly. Unfortunately, a really good example of a timed, this is not time limited, quest that could have used a little bit of help is in Ocarina of Time, where you have the timed quest to get the Bulgarian sword. It's a quest chain.
It is. Yes, it is a quest chain.
And you have to follow a certain sequence of events within a certain amount of time, and you basically have to run across the map. The only thing that would have made that better is if there would have been some sort of on-screen indication as to how far you were before the tears spoiled or the plant rotted or whatever the different elements were.
Right.
So if you're going to use a timed side quest, either give a timer or some sort of on-screen indicator to let the player know. Dragon's Dogma is excellent about that with food.
Yes, with the food.
You know, they'll tell you your food is ripe. Your food is starting to get sour. Your food is spoiling. Your food is now spoiled.
Yes.
Something so the player can know how close they are to losing that particular part of the story.
And I love it. I love when I'm given these indicators so that the stress is taken off of me having to remember all this stuff and joggle it in my head. Just put it on the screen, put it in a quest journal, something so that I can just refer back to it.
Right.
Because a player's got enough on their mind.
Exactly. So to jump off topic slightly, but this is important because we need to qualify time limited.
Yes.
If the entire game is a time limited main quest experience like Persona 5, that's fine because from the very beginning of the game, you're setting the expectation that you have X number of days to complete that part of the story. In the case of Persona 5, they give you more than enough time.
They do.
And in the case of Atelier, they give you barely enough time.
Barely.
So look at the difference. If you're going to create anything time limited, if you have to, give your player an abundance of time so that they don't feel like they have to rush or they're going to lose. So on the topic of side quests, how can we make them as interesting and fun as possible, Teal?
You need to make each of your side quests have something unique about it. Because if you have very similar side quests, it gets boring. You know, again, I harp on the boring theme, but honestly, you have a short amount of time to keep your player's attention with each transition of your game. And it doesn't matter if you've been doing fine so far, you can bog down the middle of your game by having a bunch of nearly identical quests that the player has to go on, or that the player could go on. I'm not saying you have to push the player onto every single side quest, but I am saying that you should make your side quests so unique that the player will feel intrigued enough to go on them.
That is an amazing point, Teal, and I completely agree. Each side quest not only should enrich the player's experience, but give them a flavor of uniqueness. Because in real life, every single interaction with someone is unique.
Yes, it is.
Why not translate that over into a game? And while we're talking about side quests, let's talk about the reward. So here's something to consider when creating a quest and rewarding the player. Make the quest rewards both relevant to the side quest and rewarding for the player's time. Risk versus reward. ROI, return on investment.
Yes, I agree with you on that one. My time is valuable. And I don't want to feel like pursuing this quest isn't worthwhile because at the end of it, you're only going to get a potion.
Exactly. That is cheap as hell and never needs to be done.
No. If I'm going to go on a quest, you better have a decent reward waiting for me at the end of it. And whether the reward is an item or a level up or an increase in some sort of rank, it needs to be commensurate with the level of effort you put into the quest.
Absolutely. And I think that the greater the quest, the greater the reward is a good litmus test.
It is.
How much time and energy does the player have to put into the quest? That time should equal the strength of the reward.
Thank you. Yes.
And I have a question. What do you feel about job boards, adventure boards? What are your thoughts on those? Where you just go to a board, pull a quest down, usually a fetch or a kill quest, and do something. What are your thoughts on those?
I think they can be very useful. First of all, they're optional. You never have to go to a job board if you don't want to. But if you choose to go on those quests, then the reward needs to be something that you can use.
I agree. I think maybe a item, a craftable.
Some sort of craftable, right? Some sort of resource, an item that you might be lacking in your inventory, such as an ether.
Exactly. And the beautiful thing about those quest board quests is that they can easily be made radiant. Radiant meaning repeatable.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with a repeatable quest, again, as long as it's unique. So if you're going to have a repeatable fetch quest, have it be the only repeatable fetch quest of that kind in the game.
Oh, I just thought of a good reward for those types of job board quests. Gold, money.
Yeah.
This is a great way to earn your income in a game.
Absolutely. Especially if the output of gold required by the player, as in buying healing items and going to the inn, is less than the monetary reward. It's a great way to farm.
Absolutely it is. And I've done that many times myself.
Now I'm going to talk about the last type of side quest that really burns me before we move on to a new topic. The escort mission. Escort missions have been the bane of players' existence since the beginning of time and are very rarely handled well.
I actually hate escort missions. The thing that comes to mind are the Dynasty Warrior games.
Oh, God.
You have, I'm going to call her Ding Dong. I don't really remember her name, but I'm going to call her Ding Dong. She's some blonde character that, oh, help, help, help. She's getting attacked by bandits. Go save her. I'm busy trying to take the keep. Why do I want to go rescue Ding Dong?
Oh my God, those bring back memories.
Yeah, and you have to escort her out of danger into the safe zone.
I agree completely. One of the best games in the PS3 era was The Last of Us.
Ooh, yeah.
And as beautiful as that game was, as wonderful as the mechanics were, and as engrossing as the story was, the game was basically a glorified escort mission. You're escorting Ellie about 85% of the game, and there was an innate problem with that. The game would end if Ellie was found and killed by one of the monsters or one of the humans. Ellie did not create noise. The monsters and the NPC humans couldn't hear Ellie. They could only hear you. That was a positive. That was a way it was done well. You didn't have to worry about your escorted character blowing your cover. Granted, it kind of broke immersion when she would make a joke or do something silly or whatever, which wasn't often but happened. Mm-hmm. And her ass got in your way all the time. But hey, PS3 era AI scripting, we were still learning. The point is that there are ways to handle escorts properly. But if you don't handle it in exactly a certain way, which is have the escort not be a liability to the mission, have the escort be capable of some level of self-defense, and have the escort not always falling into danger every single step, then it's okay. There are still going to be people who are going to say escort missions are terrible no matter what.
Which is me.
Yeah.
I just think escort missions, if you put them in at all, they need to be short.
Agreed.
And there needs to be some kind of reward for me doing this. Sorry. I like to keep playing the game, and escort missions just drag me down.
Agreed completely.
But hey, there are times and places for them.
Yeah.
And if the escort mission adds to your overall narrative, then go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I agree. So that leaves side quests and brings us to minigames.
Yay, minigames!
Now, everything we said about side quests, where it has to be unique and enriching and not the same thing over and over again,
right,
you can bring that right into minigames.
Absolutely, you can.
But there's more points on minigames as well.
Minigames are an opportunity to take advantage of unique engine features.
Exactly. If you're using an engine, use the minigame to see how far you can stretch that engine.
Oh, yeah.
Does your engine allow for touchscreen capabilities? Does it allow for mouse as well as keyboard? Find out what that engine can do and push the limits with your minigame. Give the player a unique, engrossing experience that no other game has.
That can be a lot of fun. A prime example is when the PlayStation Network was first launched, and they had this rubber ducky game.
Oh my God, yes.
And the rubber ducky game took advantage of the new motion controller that PlayStation released.
Yeah, the tilt function.
The tilt function. So you could use this controller to steer your rubber ducky into the goal.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I miss that game.
It really was. It was a lot of fun. It did really well in showcasing what the PlayStation 3 was capable of.
Yes.
So use advantage of your software and your hardware. Now, this is a big bone of contention for me. And Teal, feel free to jump in with your own experiences. Okay. Minigames need to be a break in the action so long as they don't interrupt the flow of your story.
Yes. Minigames shouldn't take the place of your narrative.
Right.
The minigame also shouldn't interrupt your narrative and steer the player in either a wrong direction or just totally breaks their mojo.
Absolutely. And I'm going to pick on Final Fantasy because who doesn't nowadays? As an example of a fantastic minigame that worked with the flow of the story versus a minigame that sucked balls.
Okay.
I am talking about Final Fantasy X's Blitzball.
Oh, that was so much fun.
Even if you didn't like it, even if you hated it, you have to admit it integrated itself into the world story beautifully.
Yes, it did.
The Besaid Aurochs fight against
the Luca Goers.
Oh my God, you remember. That's awesome. You win or lose the tournament, which is irrelevant to advancing the story, but does bring out Wakka's character arc.
It sure does.
And then you're allowed to continue doing this minigame while you're on Yuna's journey to Zanarkand, etc. But at no point do you feel like you have to stop the game and play Blitzball. So when you're at that point where, oh my God, it's time to go to the High Tower to talk to Micah, the High Maester, about what sin is really about, you're not compelled to stop the game and play this mini game. You play it when you want on your own terms. It's well executed, and you feel like you're a part of the world.
Yes, goodness knows I wouldn't want to be about to enter the final dungeon and then, oh no, you got to stop and play Blitzball because this reason or that reason.
Exactly. Now, a mini game that's in Final Fantasy X that is awful is the Dodge Lightning.
Oh, Dodge
in
Lightning in the Thunderplanes, yeah.
Whoever thought of that, shame on you.
Oh, that was tedious.
I mean, not only does it screw over one of my favorite characters, Lulu, you can't get her ultimate weapon without it, but it's next to impossible on a tedious level.
It is tedious.
Even if you can do it, you have this sense of hating yourself the entire time. It's extremely stressful. It adds no value. The chocobo racing for Titus's son, Sigil, isn't much better.
No, it's not. I hated the chocobo racing, actually, because I kept losing.
Yeah. So both of those mini games are incorporated badly because they give you this sense of stress instead of this sense of relaxation.
Mini games are supposed to be fun, guys. Not work, not a chore.
Exactly. Also, and here's again picking on Final Fantasy X, because why the hell not? Don't make your minigame a condition for completing the main game or beating super bosses.
Oh, no, yes.
Now, we're not going to talk about super bosses in this podcast, but super bosses should require strategy.
They should.
They should require maybe a small element of luck, but mostly strategy.
It needs to be strategy. You're supposed to be using all the skills that you've been building throughout the entire game to defeat this really hard boss.
That's usually harder than the final boss.
Yeah, usually.
So when you make a minigame victory a condition, like the lightning strikes, the chocobo racing, and even Blitzball, the condition for being able to defeat these things because you need to have the legendary weapons, you at that point have told the player, if you want to complete this game 100%, you have to be good at these mini games. And that is just not good game design.
It's not good game design at all. I'm going to throw out another Final Fantasy example. Final Fantasy VIII, Triple Triad.
Oh my goodness.
You had to get good at Triple Triad in order to win it, go all the way to the end, and get the final rewards, which was the Hero Wars and Hero War Trials. Because you could not beat the ultimate super boss Omega without having a big collection of Holy Wars and Holy War Trials in your inventory. Exactly. It was impossible to beat this guy.
And point of order to everyone, Teal actually did completely master Triple Triad, beat everybody, and destroyed Omega Weapon. She actually did 100% Final Fantasy VIII.
I got proof of Omega. But moving on, see, that's really important, is a lot of folks didn't like Triple Triad. A lot of folks couldn't play it. It was just too difficult. It was too hard. It was time consuming. So why make that a condition for winning?
Exactly. And then when Final Fantasy IX came out with Tetramaster, they so completely removed the reward that it really was superfluous at that point. So they went in the other direction. They never found their happy middle ground of a card game that adds value, but not necessity.
Thank you. That is the point right there. You want to add value without making it necessary to win your game.
Exactly. And finally, personalize your minigame experience to the world. And what I mean by that is, Don't create a minigame that jarringly pulls the player from the world.
Absolutely.
Create a minigame that integrates itself into it. A really good example is poker and blackjack in Red Dead Redemption.
Oh, yes.
Not only do those fit with you going into a saloon and playing these card games with other people, it's even done in a style that feels like you're playing an old Western card game, up to and including the banter, the ability to cheat, and possibly even starting a gunfight.
What a fun experience.
Absolutely. The casino games in Fallout New Vegas, beautifully crafted. You go in there and you play roulette, you play blackjack.
Okay, stop right there. Fallout New Vegas. They did it right. I'm going to expand on this one. So Fallout New Vegas has 2 places where you can play casino type games.
Mm-hmm.
You have 2 opportunities to jump in there, play games, and have a good time.
Right.
You also get rewarded for playing these games.
Yes.
The games mesh with the world so completely, it feels very natural to walk in there and start playing.
To the point of the casinos kick you out if you win enough money.
Yes.
I mean, that for me was so immersive. I didn't mind being kicked out of the casino and capped at how many caps I could win, because it just felt right.
Yes, it does. This is an example of meshing that minigame completely with the world.
Yes.
I could bring up other examples of other Fallout games that do this well.
Right.
But I think the point has been made that you really want to craft your minigame around your world.
Absolutely. As much as you're integrating those side quests, integrate those minigames. Integrate everything.
Yes, please.
So now we move on to puzzles.
Oh, joy. Puzzles. That's the bane of my existence, actually.
Now, I want to qualify this by saying we are talking about puzzles in games.
Yes.
But everything we're talking about can be taken on a macro level to puzzle games.
Sure.
Puzzle games like, for example, The Adventures of Lolo for the NES can be fantastic if they're done right.
Yeah.
However, we're focusing right now on puzzles within games. So if you're building a puzzle game, kind of take this and just bring it up to the highest level possible. So let's talk about puzzles.
Okay. I guess the first point I want to make is that puzzles should explain themselves. Okay. And you need to show your player all the pieces.
Exactly. Having a hidden puzzle piece or a part of the puzzle that's not being shown is just plain dirty pool.
Yes, it is. And on the same lines, if I don't understand your puzzle and I can't figure out what it is I'm supposed to be doing, then your puzzle has failed.
It really has. And I want to talk a bit about red herrings, because red herrings are a cardinal sin.
Yes, they are.
And there's an inverse to them, which I think are brilliant. For example, a red herring is a piece of a puzzle that you think is useful when it's actually useless.
Right.
That is a time waster. It makes the player frustrated, and they feel like not only are they wasting their time, but you are mocking them as the game designer.
Oh, yeah.
And once a player feels that you, the game designer, are against them, they're going to stop playing your game. The inverse of this is a piece that seems useless, but is actually useful.
Oh.
That, when done properly and elegantly, enriches the puzzle experience because it forces the player to expand their mind and look at things differently.
So to build on your point, Steele, I just want to say that I would prefer that game designers use the smallest amount of space and pieces for their puzzle.
Absolutely. I'm going to expand on that, and then I'm going to mention something that's pure theory, but I'm not going to go too deeply into that because that would be its own podcast.
Right.
So to expand on that, have each of your puzzles be a self-contained part of a greater whole. Don't have your puzzle be the entire dungeon. I watched a stream not too long ago where they had a relatively good dungeon, but the entire dungeon was a massive puzzle. That's not good game design.
That's awful, because you have to run from one end to the other end, and if I have to stop playing for a little bit and then come back, I'm going to be completely lost.
Exactly. The good way to do that, if you have to have a puzzle dungeon, which is fine, is have each individual part be its own little self-contained puzzle.
Yes.
And we did that in one of our games where we had a very large dungeon, and the whole dungeon was puzzle pieces.
The whole dungeon was involved in the puzzle, but
each little section was its own mini puzzle.
Yes, it was.
So the player would go into this section move around a little bit, puzzle solve, then advance to another section, somewhat non-linearly at times,
right,
solve that part, and as they did, it would open up the greater whole and solve the main dungeon's main puzzle. That's how you do it. Don't have your player run around the whole dungeon. Instead, little pieces here and there. A great example of a wonderful game that shoots itself in the foot with a shitty-ass whole puzzle dungeon is Eternal Sonata.
Oh, no.
And that damn fortress.
So this fortress was basically the puzzle from hell.
Mm-hmm.
Because you had to literally go one end, grab a piece, gallop to the other end of the dungeon, put the piece in, then gallop to the first part of the dungeon and flip a switch.
Which would move another part of the dungeon, accessing another switch, and thus starting the loop all over. It was horrible. It was horrible.
Yeah.
And we loved that game. The story and the characters were very enriching, and both times we played, that full stop nearly made us walk away.
Yeah.
And it's relatively early on in the game.
And it's a puzzle that you have to complete in order to progress.
Yes, you can't do the game without it.
Which I philosophically disagree with doing that. I understand why some games do.
Right.
But I've just never seen the point in making your main critical path involve a puzzle like that.
Right, a puzzle of that magnitude.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the theory I'm going to very briefly talk about is possibility space.
Go for it, Steele.
Possibility space is the physical space of the puzzle and what it offers the player in realms of solving it. Okay. For example, you take a block, you move it to the left, moving it to the right resets the puzzle, but moving it down brings the puzzle further. The larger that space is, the more moves there are to complete the puzzle.
Yeah.
And if a player keeps moving that piece around, sooner or later, they'll either solve the puzzle or hit a dead end. So if we get very basic, a 3x3 grid, that possibility space is rather small, and it is going to be solvable in a relatively short amount of time,
right?
Even if they hit a dead end. A 30x30 is considerably more complex.
Ouch, yeah.
So this brings us back to the first point, which is that they should use the smallest amount of space possible.
Absolutely.
For it to work.
I've actually had negative experiences with puzzles that got your possibility space wrong.
Agreed.
What I really hate the most about these puzzles is that I get in there and I start moving pieces around,
right,
flipping switches, and I hit either a dead end or I'm going in circles.
Right.
And I don't know how to reset the puzzle. The more I pull and push, the worse it gets. And I end up basically having to leave the room completely and come back in.
Yes.
And hopefully that resets the puzzle. 9 times out of 10 it does. There are those rare games out there where it doesn't. You have to go to a previous save.
Which is unforgivable.
But I really dislike puzzles because most of them are too complicated.
It takes away from the enjoyment. And that leads us to the point of balancing the difficulty of the puzzle between it being too difficult and too easy. You need to find that medium. And the only way to do that is to play test it through other people. You know the solution. You are the worst play tester for your own puzzles.
Thank you. You need to have plenty of beta testers out there of varying degrees of skill.
Agreed.
Okay? Don't always pick your pool of beta testers from people who are really good at puzzles, really good at this. You need to have a range of folks. Folks like me who don't really do great with the complicated puzzles, and I just want to finish this and move on. So, yeah, you need to have a range of folks to really test out your puzzles to give you that balance.
Agreed.
On the other hand, you don't want it to be too easy either. Right. Just as you've put it before, Steele, bashing your way through the puzzle.
Yeah, brute force it.
Yep.
So for me, the last, and this is actually the most important point of puzzles, is that a good puzzle should teach the player. It should be ambitious, and it should be rewarding. And out of all those points, me, Steele, the romantic, thinks that teaching the player is the most important.
Actually, I agree with you. I usually go for the rewards. Hey, I want the big shiny. But you actually, that is a very good point. I feel better when I feel like I've learned something.
Yeah, you take away an intangible.
Yeah.
Now, you should still have a reward, whether that reward be advancing the main story,
Sure,
a really cool item that they can only get by solving that puzzle, something that's part of a larger quest, etc., etc., etc.
right.
Never have a puzzle that has no reward. That does not work.
Or a puzzle without a point. You just put the puzzle there for the puzzle's sake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then finally, being ambitious. This is a bit subjective. As a designer, you should stretch both your development skills and the engine that you're in to make the puzzle as cool, unique, and fun as possible. My core philosophy on puzzles is if the player knows they're doing a puzzle and feels that it integrates itself well into the world, you're doing it right. But if the player doesn't know they're doing a puzzle until they've solved it, you're doing it perfect.
I like that. That's pretty cool. Well, for me, I'd like to leave everybody with this. Please respect the player's time by approaching your puzzle from a minimalist perspective.
I agree completely.
As I've said before, I don't like being faced with complicated puzzles, big puzzles, or puzzles that I don't understand what it is that I'm supposed to do to solve them or to see what the point is.
I agree completely, Teal. A player's time is valuable. There are so many games out there. If the player hits a stumbling block they can't advance past, you've lost them. And it's not because they're a bad player. It's because you designed something improperly. Understand, and we joke about this a lot on Discord and the feeds that we watch where people are playing games and getting killed because they're playing a survival horror game on the hardest difficulty. We always say, get good, get better. The reality is, if it's a puzzle that stops you, that's not the player, that's the developer.
Because the point of your game is not the puzzle, it's your story.
Right.
Okay? So keep that in mind when you're designing these puzzles.
Exactly. And if you're designing a puzzle game, take what we just said to heart, because your job is to gradually make the puzzles harder.
Yeah.
To gradually introduce more and more elements so that over the course of the game, each puzzle is a little more difficult, a little more difficult.
But you're teaching me. At that point, you are leading me through your puzzles. You're teaching me how to solve your puzzles. And that's great. I really appreciate that.
Exactly. And if by the end of the game, like in the Adventures of Lolo, I can't solve something, it's not because you failed as a developer, it's because I've reached my limit on what I can solve.
Right.
You've done everything you can to help me, and I'm falling short.
Oh well.
Oh well.
I mean,
that's just it.
That's par for the course, you know?
And that pretty much brings us to the end of it. Side quests, puzzles, and minigames can really enrich your world, but they can also really detract.
So when you're designing these things, keep in mind the point of them.
Exactly. Let us know what you think. Give us feedback on this. What do you think about side quests, puzzles, minigames? Have we missed something? Is there something you don't agree with? Is there something that really touched you on this? Let us know. We'd like to hear back from our listeners.
Yes, we would. And especially if you are a puzzle designer, we'd love to hear from you on your experiences.
Exactly. We want to thank everyone for listening. We've just started, we're hitting this strong, and we're going to keep going.
Absolutely.
So join us next time for DLC Not Included. And remember,
anyone can give you the key, but you have to go through the door.